welcome to the Watchman. You know, during the 2012 presidential campaign, President Obama was fond of saying, Al-Qaeda is on the run and nearing defeat. Remember that?
There should be no doubt. Today, America is stronger, and Al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat.
We've decimated Al-Qaeda's leadership.
Al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat, and bin Laden is dead.
Mind you, he said this after Benghazi. Now, as we've documented on this show many times, President Obama was just plain wrong. Al-Qaeda now covers more geographical ground than it did on 9/11. Just look at this map. From its hub in Pakistan's tribal regions, AQ has spread to Somalia, Sinai, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Mali, and the Sahara Desert region, and Europe. Al-Qaeda also has strong ties in the Caucasus region of southern Russia, where it works closely with Islamic jihadists in places like Chechnya and Dagestan, who are threatening to strike at the upcoming Sochi Olympics. And that's not even mentioning the various homegrown jihadists here in the West who may not have direct links to Al-Qaeda but are inspired by its ideology. Exhibit A, the Boston Bombers. Bottom line, Al-Qaeda and the global jihadist movement are growing. But don't tell that to President Obama. Oh no. He's got his story, folks, and he's sticking to it. In a recent interview with The New Yorker, the president scoffed at the growing Al-Qaeda movement in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere, comparing them to a JV basketball team that isn't ready to play with the big boys. The clear message this sends to the American people is, move along, folks. Nothing to see here. After all, Osama bin Laden is dead. There is no Islamic terror threat anymore. No, just a few sad sack amateurs. Really, Mr. President? Let's take a look at some of the recent exploits of the so-called JV of global jihad. According to the New York Times, some 1,200 Americans and Europeans have traveled to Syria to join the jihadist rebels there. And that number sounds low. Western officials say at least 700 have traveled to Syria from France, some 240 from Germany, some 500 from Britain, and yes, at least 70 Americans have traveled to or tried to travel to Syria to join the jihad against the Assad regime. If they don't get killed on the battlefield, these Western Muslims will eventually return to their home countries as battle-hardened mujahideen, holy warriors. What happens then is anyone's guess. But hey, not to worry, they're just the JV team. That same JV team of Al-Qaeda has now recaptured territory in Iraq, including the city of Fallujah. Remember Fallujah? In 2004, U.S. forces recaptured the city from Al-Qaeda in the bloodiest battle for U.S. forces since the Vietnam War. Now U.S. forces are gone, and Al-Qaeda has actually seized some of the American military hardware that was left behind. In fact, according to CNN terrorism analyst Peter Bergen, Al-Qaeda now controls more territory than it ever has in the Middle East, including parts of Syria and Iraq. If they keep this up, they may even be promoted to the varsity team, Mr. President. Let's just hope an attack on American interest isn't what gains them a spot in the big leagues. Well, speaking of Al-Qaeda expanding its reach in the Middle East, Israel recently rolled up an Al-Qaeda-linked terror cell in eastern Jerusalem. The three-man cell reportedly had links back to Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri and planned to attack the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, among other targets. Now, all of Jerusalem is currently under Israeli control. If Israel is uncovering terror cells in the eastern half of the city now, just imagine, folks, what things would be like if that area was under Palestinian control, like the international community led by the Obama administration would like to see happen. You know, Jerusalem is literally the center of the world, and it is God's eternal city. There's no more exciting place for a Christian journalist to work. I recently sat down with Leila Gilbert. She's the author of a must-read new book called Saturday People, Sunday People. She's based in Jerusalem, and she has a front row seat to history. Take a look. Well, Leela, you wrote this fascinating book, Saturday People, Sunday People, Israel Through the Eyes of a Christian Sojourner. I said the word correctly. This is a great book, and I know our viewers are going to love this book. This is a bird's eye, on-the-ground view of Israel, of the Jewish people, and to me, this presents the truth about Israel. Now, let's back up to why you, an American by birth, why did you go to Israel?
Curiosity mostly, and my father was a great lover of Israel. He was a man who, in the 1940s, watched the people regather and watched the country come into being, and he loved that story. He felt it was a fulfillment, which I do too, of prophecy in his lifetime.
And you were a Christian.
Yes, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. And I went over I didn't want to go on a tour. I wanted to go stay over there for a while, and so I rented an apartment for 4 months. Because I'm a writer, I can, work anywhere. And I never left. I mean, I come and go from America, but I've been in 3 apartments now, and I'm going back to the one I'm in now tomorrow.
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem.
If I could live anywhere, Leela, I would be in Jerusalem. Greatest city in the world.
It is. It's wonderful.
So
and
it captured your heart from the beginning.
It really did. And, I heard somebody say yesterday that when you go there as a Christian, you feel you've come home. And I did. And I felt kind of silly about that. It seemed kind of corny, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, and we're here at the Christians United for Israel Summit in Washington, D.C. I think it's the perfect backdrop for your book. Tell us why you wrote the book, Saturday People, Sunday People. Tell us why you wrote it, Leela, and what it's all about.
Well, there's a jihadi saying, on Saturday we kill the Jews, on Sunday we kill the Christians. It gets watered down, and on the graffiti I think it sometimes just says first comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. But that's what the real thing, and there's a picture of a flag in my book that has that in Arabic. So that was the reason I titled it that way. But I started to write it as a memoir, but then I began to research some stories that I'd heard since I got there about Israel that were complete lies. And I was in a position where I could research them a little and talk to people that knew what they were talking about. And one of them was about Israel being an apartheid state, which is absolutely ridiculous. And another was about the Temple Mount, never having had a temple on it. Yasser Arafat gave us that piece of information.
Yes, he did. He did. The Jewish temples never stood. I believe he said a mosque stood where the temple once stood.
Yes, it was
where the Western Wall is now.
Yeah, there was never anything. It was in Nablus, he said.
And that's one of the things I love about your book, Leela, because you dispel these myths and you're laying out the facts. You're laying out the case for Israel, the goodness of Israel, and the historical case for Israel. And as you said, you're talking to experts. You're talking to people who know these issues intimately. What's the response been to you, a Christian in Israel, reporting on these issues? How's the Jewish-Israeli response been to your work?
It's been phenomenal. In fact, this is the first time I've even spoken to a Christian audience. I've been
Glad to have you.
Thank you. But it was a surprise to me. It was a warm welcome. I mean, a tearful welcome, a thank you. And it's been very meaningful to me to have the freedom to speak about my faith, not in trying to convert anyone, but in just sharing the fact that this is a blessing to me too. Talk about the Temple Mount. That's our Temple Mount too. We're Christians. Jesus was there. There was a huge basilica there in the 4th and 5th century. It's gone. You don't hear about it because it was only a Muslim site. But it's not true at all.
Coming up, more with Leela Gilbert on her new book, Saturday People, Sunday People. Stick around. Talk about what you've seen, the Spirit of God moving in Israel, among the Jewish people in Israel as well. We obviously disagree on the Messiah, Mashiach,
right.
But you and I have talked, and you said, I still feel the Spirit of God in the people there. Talk about that a bit.
Sure. Well, people still believe the Bible there. People still have a God consciousness there that you don't see so much here anymore, except in churches. But in ordinary people, and a lot of the Jewish people I know don't attend synagogue. They're secular in the sense that they don't observe the law. But they still believe in prayer, and they still believe in the Bible. And they believe
fear God.
They fear God, and they believe God brought them back to their land, but they just are rebellious against some of the strictness of the law. But everybody believes that Christians are onto something. I mean, except for the most angry, there are a few people on the extreme edges. Yeah. But even some of them have welcomed me. And the way they do it is they say, well, you're going to find out you're Jewish. And I don't think that's going to happen, but it might. But no, I've been treated like gold by everybody.
Not exactly an apartheid intolerant state.
Not toward me and not toward anybody I know.
Leila, I think one of the cool things about the book is you talk about when you first arrived in Jerusalem, and just the sights, the sounds, the senses can be overwhelming. Jerusalem, it's alive. There's an energy there. For our viewers who may have never had the opportunity to be to Israel and be blessed to be in Israel, be on the ground in Jerusalem like you and I have, and you live there, tell us what Jerusalem is like, the hustle, the bustle, the Spirit of God. It's a special place.
It is, and it's very high energy. The people are very engaged, and one of the things I often say, and I really noticed this myself, and then I've heard it said otherwise, people celebrate life in Israel. They've seen a lot of death. Everybody in that country has been wounded, and yet you hear them singing on the weekends, over the dinner, over the Shabbat dinner. When the families get together for holidays, you hear music in the streets, families singing together. There's very great engagement in politics, and politics are a matter of life and death in Israel. They're not like here, people debate and argue there, or at least we used to think it was a life and death. I think we're beginning to wonder now if it is life and death here, but there it for certain is. And so I think the level of energy is what I miss when I come back, especially to California, where it's very quiet and more relaxed. And I get bored after a few days.
So you look forward to going back to Israel?
Oh, yeah.
Is that your home now? Do you consider
it is my home now. For another year at least, I have a visa. Yeah. And then we'll see. I don't know. I'm afraid I've had to learn to live one day at a time.
Yeah. What are some of the most fascinating or maybe surprising things you uncovered in your research for the book, and maybe just even your on-the-ground experiences in Israel that made you say, wow, I didn't know that, or that's really surprising to me?
Well, the thing that startled me the most was the 850,000 Jewish refugees that were kicked out of Muslim countries between 1948 and 1970. There were more of them than there were of the Palestinians who left their homes behind during the war. And yet we've heard nothing except about them.
What about their right of return?
Well, that's it. The amount of land that was confiscated was 5 times the size of the state of Israel when it was all figured out. There's never been any...
1 million Jews.
Yes.
From Arab nations. People don't know that, who came to Israel.
And
it's an amazing untold story. You chronicle it in this book.
And there's less than 5,000 left in those countries where there were 1 million. And they've all gone. And now the Christians are getting kicked out of the same places.
They are. The Middle East is being emptied. The cradle of Christianity, birthplace of Christianity being emptied of Christians. Leila, thank you so much for this book. It's called Saturday People, Sunday People. It is a must-read. Pick it up. Leila, God bless you. Thanks so much. Shalom, and hopefully we'll see you next year in Jerusalem. Up next, how you can help the poor and needy in Israel. Don't move. Welcome back. In the book of Genesis, God says to Abraham regarding Israel, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Israel today is a thriving democracy on the cutting edge of technology, but like every country, Israel has its problems, and it has its poor. I recently sat down with Rabbi Pinchos Woolstone. He's the Director of Development for a group called United Soup Kitchens in Israel that is lending a hand to the poor and needy in the Holy Land. Take a look. Pinchos Woolstone, welcome.
Welcome to you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, great to have you here. Look, we hear a lot in the U.S. about the war on poverty, the war on hunger, but what a lot of people don't know is that in Israel there are similar problems. Tell us a bit about the state of poverty, of homelessness in Israel right now, and then we'll get to your organization and what you're doing to fight back against it.
Okay. I think in any democracy, and Israel is really the only democracy in the Middle East, but I think in any democracy, at the moment, society is moving in 2 directions. Firstly, the rich are getting richer, and the poor, which is now including the lower middle class, are getting poorer. And that solid middle class, which we're all used to, being Americans, or where I come from, Australians, or Israelis, or Western Europeans, that middle ground is being squeezed down. And poverty is on the increase everywhere, and Israel is no exception.
And the Israeli economy is booming, though, right? I mean,
I think in the high-tech world,
Yeah.
you know, there are more and more millionaires being produced every day. There are people
Sure.
flying from the United States to Israel, Israel to Europe,
Yeah.
literally every day with new deals, high-tech deals,
Sure.
et cetera, et cetera. But the underbelly, the poverty of underbelly is increasing.
sure. And your organization, United Soup Kitchens in Israel, tell us what you're doing to fight back against it.
We're doing some basic things, and we're doing some more high-tech things. The basic thing is we're feeding people on a daily basis through soup kitchens. We have upward of 25 locations from Eilat in the south until Metula, the border with Lebanon in the
Wow.
north, and everywhere in between.
So you're spanning the whole country. And Israel's a
Yes.
tiny country.
It's a very tiny country, and we are going from the Mediterranean Sea through to the Jordan Valley to the border with the Kingdom of Jordan.
And I just looking at your site, at your website, which you see on the screen right now for United Soup Kitchens in Israel, some of what you're doing, just so people at home know: monthly pantry deliveries to indigent families in Israel, holiday food baskets, non-profit supermarkets where the poor can shop in dignity, save 40% on groceries.
That's fantastic. I think we're pioneers in the world in that, where a person can go in and they can shop like any other shopper, and discreetly, when they come to the checkout counter, they can give their coupon, and automatically, without anything being said, the whole thing is rung up minus 40%.
Wow.
And we are developing at the moment a process where people won't even have to give a piece of paper.
Wow.
There will be a number, and they'll say, like you do with a credit card, 6259, that's jumped in, so that even more discreet. And 2 or 3 of the major supermarket chains have jumped on the bandwagon with us.
Wow.
So that's a terrific process, because there are people that will not come to the food pantry.
Yeah.
They will not go to a Meals on Wheels program. They won't come into a soup kitchen because their dignity will not permit them to
Yeah.
go through. And that's
Lot of pride.
understandable, especially if these are people who once had good jobs and lived a solid middle-class life, and now they're being reduced nearly to the levels of being beggars.
Wow. You know, you also have a widows and orphans program at United Soup Kitchens in Israel. And before the interview, you were telling me about mobile dentistry also. It sounds pretty interesting. Tell us about that.
Yes, we have very large vans, and these are totally equipped as mobile dental hospitals, where even minor, not only are teeth extracted and fillings given, but minor dental surgery is performed. And these go to towns, cities, all over the country, and help kids who have got very bad dental hygiene, because medical health is expensive in Israel. And most of the programs do not cover dental. So there are kids who are ready at 14 or 15, they have virtually no teeth.
Well, on this show, we want to bless Israel, bless the Jewish people. The Bible says, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, to the people of Israel. So tell us how we can help your organization, United Soup Kitchens in Israel.
The website is going out specifically to evangelical Christian community here in North America.
Okay.
And we don't think. We know that the Christian community in general and the evangelical community in particular have been very strong supporters of the State of Israel, the land of Israel, and the people of Israel.
And before we go real quick, the website again?
uskisrael.org.
Coming up, some final thoughts. Stick around. And welcome back. You know, I travel around the country frequently and I speak to large audiences about the Islamic terror threat, the gathering storm against America and Israel, and what's brewing in the Middle East and what it all means. Look, it's not always easy to be the bearer of bad news, but in my talks, I always wrap by offering some good news, some words of encouragement. We can defeat this radical Islamist threat, but first, folks, we have to acknowledge it. What's the first rule of war? Know your enemy. Acknowledge the enemy. We are up against Islamic jihadists who seek a global caliphate and Islamic Sharia law for one and all, whether you like it or not. The first target on their list is Israel, but Israel is not the only target. Israel is a bump on the road to the great Satan, America. That is their view, that is their ideology, whether it's Iran, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, and so on. It starts with Israel. It ends with America. We need to acknowledge that fact. But here's some encouragement. Look, many in our mainstream media, in our political elite, will not acknowledge what we're up against, but the American people are acknowledging what we're up against, folks. I see it every time I'm on the road speaking to large crowds. People are engaged and they're educated on this issue, but it seems like a small group of Americans who really get it. So what we need to do as Americans is, number one, stay informed. You don't have to be a Middle East expert, but you do owe it to your kids, your grandkids, and yourself to do 15 minutes a day, maybe, of reading the newspaper, of following what's going on in the world, because in this interconnected world today, folks, what happens over there affects you over here. Number two, join with like-minded people who have a concern about this issue. Think of the Tea Party, grassroots movement, average Americans, what they accomplished in terms of supporting limited government, lower taxes. We can do that with the radical Islamic threat and the threats to America and Israel as well. Think of Christians United for Israel, CUFI, Pastor Hagee and David Brogg's organization, over 1 million members having great influence here on Capitol Hill. Number three, get in the ears of your local officials, your state officials, federal officials, state senators, city council, at the federal level, your senator, your congressman, whoever has a position of influence, get in their ear, make your voice heard, folks. This is still a democracy, and we still have a say. Let's try to turn this thing around, because this will not be won inside the Beltway. This battle will not be won here in Washington, D.C., where I'm standing right now. It will be won at the grassroots. And last thing, folks, most important thing, pray, 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 because it works. So, from the Watchman, thank you for joining us. And until next week, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.